Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for May 9th, 2023. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. It is episode 142 and I have with me the great pleasure of bringing back Matt Ehret of CanadianPatriot.org as well as his Substack over at mattehret.substack.com. Glad to really have Matt back on the show because I thought with the coronation of King Charles, I thought it would be enjoyable to have, Matt come in and tell me all the things that I think I know about the British Crown, but really don't. So I'm going to pretty much shut up and welcome Matt to the show, and then we're going to go from there. So Matt, welcome. It's time for you to tell everybody just how horrible the British Crown is, like we didn't already know that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I feel like I'm really preaching to the choir. And first of all, Tom, I love being on with you. I mean, we have some of the most fun conversations that I have with any podcaster that I know. I always look forward to these things. So I'm going to try. I'm sure we're going to blow some people's minds on some level. And I think for me, the essay that I just put out in honor of the inbred king himself.
King Putz. I like King Putz.
Yeah, King Putz. Yeah. Putz. It's on. It was titled officially Global Britain and King Charles's Great Reset, just to primarily deal with certain mythologies that have been really hammered and promoted year after year after year, both for Canadians as well as for some Americans, that pretty much all echo the same thesis that the crown is this, interesting relic of a bygone age, which is still really virtuous and cool, even though it's only symbolic, with no real actual power in the world that we live in today. But as far as Canadians, we pour like $100+ million a year into managing and keeping this thing going. There's 54 members of the International British Commonwealth under the control of the Crown.
Right.
Many of those nations actually have the sitting hereditary inbred, whoever that might be at one given moment, as their official head of state, as Canada does, and Australia, New Zealand, and a few others. So is it true that it's just the symbolic, useless thing that's nice, or is there a real strategic, active influence in the world today, shaping our world and our future that in a very bad way? Yes, that's to blow the punchline. Yes, super hyperactive. You've alluded to that in a lot of your works that I appreciate in more recent months, and as a Canadian, I think this maybe in some ways gave me a bit of an advantage to Americans, because I originally went to work on this research trying to figure out what the hell is Canada that I was born into. Back in 2006, I put myself on this intellectual obsession to figure out what the heck is Canada.
That's a great question. I hate to interrupt you, but that's such a great question, because you know what it feels like down here. What the hell is Canada, other than like Hockey Rush and some bad Canadian sci-fi? But and there are other things. There are pipelines too, I guess. Go ahead.
There's pipelines, yeah. But it is an anomaly. We look and we sound a lot like our American cousins down south. We watch a lot of the same shows and movies, and so, but yet there's something really different. It's very off, and you could see it like when the Prime Minister of Canada, reads aloud his oath of becoming that he has to take to become Prime Minister, which also involves going into the Privy Council and declaring your oaths of secrecy. Yeah, that's a bit weird, and people could Google if people aren't curious, they could just Google right now Justin Trudeau oath of office and oath of Privy Council. Just Google it, and you could actually listen to the recording, the video of him actually pledging allegiance to her Majesty and her heirs for perpetuity, and to act as a good servant of Her Majesty, and her heirs ought to act, and keep all things secret as should be kept secret in Privy Council. So you're like, from an American standpoint, that's bloody weird. Like, what the hell is Privy Council? What are these oaths of secrecy? Why is my head of state so-called declaring fealty to a hereditary institution? What is this?
Right.
What is that?
I think we fought a war to not have to do that. But then again, like I look at our banking system and then I have to wonder, what was it all worth it? But go ahead.
Well, that's the, but see that, and I guess that's the useful thing. So in my book series, I've got the Clash of the Two Americas, volume 1 to 4. I actually, this essay that that you read was taken and modified from my new book. I got a copy here. The volume 4, the Anglo-Venetian roots of the deep state, with a picture of the Venetian lion on St. Mark's,
Right.
and obviously Britain, USA. And I've got a whole section, several hundred pages, just on this. And the idea is to get across that what was done in America in 1776 and consolidated with the Peace of Paris in 1783, which the British delegation never actually agreed to. They didn't sit for the official portion. They just begrudgingly signed, but never actually acknowledged in their hearts what was agreed upon on paper, which is the independence of the 13 colonies.
Right.
And you read the writings of people like Cecil Rhodes, who created an organization run by Lord Milner and a hive of sociopathic young freaks under the Round Table movement at the end of the 19th century, which managed the Rhodes Scholarship Funds that brainwashed 7,000 Americans over the course of 120 years in the halls of Oxford to become Borg zombies, deployed back into their home country to undo the American Revolution. But you read the writings of Cecil Rhodes. He always in the 1880s, 1890s, he's speaking of America as the colonies. They never, he's representing how the inner echelons actually think about America, which is, it's just a wayward colony that we have to reabsorb back into the fold. And so something was never quite resolved. Let's just put it that way. After the revolution,
right,
which continued to maintain a traitorous class of a local organized crime syndicate beholden to the British East India Company in the city of London, under certain families that took control of various industrial and financial enterprises in America. They centered themselves in Wall Street and what was known as the Boston Brahmins, the inner Eastern establishment families that founded, the Skull and Bones operation and other things. You had branches in Virginia with the slave power as well, the Virginia Combine in these families that were still tied to, things like Lord Palmerston's operations, like the Young Europe movement that he was running with Mazzini, with Albert Pike, who co-founds or revamps the Scottish Rite Southern Freemasonry, and sets up the basis of the Knights of the Golden Circle as the first sort of, intelligence agency run domestic terrorist operation in the wake of the Civil War that becomes the KKK. That Albert Pike, it's all tied to the same thing that's running the Northern Copperhead Democrats that are working on Wall Street to undermine the Union from within, from the North, that Lincoln is doing a battle with there. He's doing a battle with these groups also in Canada that are setting up things like the Family Compact, the Canadian, house slaves, the leading establishment families of the colonies who didn't want to do the American Revolution. They basically said, okay, we're not going to we want to remain loyal to the hereditary systems. And Britain was basically, happy to give them the territory in Canada, which is why there's English speakers in Canada. They're just Americans who didn't want to be American, and they wanted to be United Empire loyalists. Right. They set up the Family Compact to be the, things like King's College. Today's University of Toronto was formerly King's College. This stuff was always part of this organized thing with a three-pronged approach of British operations in America to destroy the revolution. So yeah, I mean, today's problems are tied to what went on or what wasn't resolved back then. So back to the article in the book on the Clash of the Two Americas. The crown is, what is the crown? What did King Charles III just become the official sort of face of? Well, the crown itself is more than the person, right? And we're saying this is being recorded on Victory Day, May 9th. Not sure it's going to go public, but that's an important thing for the listeners to hold in mind, right? Because this is the day that we've nominally been on an annual basis celebrating the victory over Nazi fascism, right? And there's something uncomfortable about that when you know about how the actual city of London and Wall Street financiers and industrialists, including the Rockefeller family, the Standard Oil Combine, the DuPont family, J.P. Morgan Steel was in the 1929, 30, 31, all the way up through World War II. While World War II was happening, the Bush family, the Harriman, Brown Brothers Harriman, the Union Banking Corporation that Prescott Bush was a director of both, were funding the rise of Hitler before and during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
The leading City of London bankers were pouring an immense amount of resources on every level to the success of Nazism in the 20s and into the 30s and into World War II, as we saw with the Bank of International Settlements, run by Montague Norman, the head of the Bank of England, who was sort of the handler of Wehrmacht, giving Wehrmacht his marching orders at every step of the way, and helping to ensure that Czechoslovakian gold would make it into Nazi coffers. And this is all way before the any type of agreements were made between the Nazis and the Russians, which happened way later on.
Right.
As the Russians were trying to buy themselves time from the obvious oncoming onslaught of the Wehrmacht, which they knew was going to happen, but they were trying to buy themselves some time. But the whole British establishment, including the King Edward VIII, who I go through a little bit in this essay and in my book, the uncle of King Charles, was a devout, rabid eugenicist and Nazi. And Nazism was not about nationalism in any way. They called themselves National Socialists, but it was an imperialist movement. Nazism was, they wanted to turn the Slavic nation into a slave colony, and talked about the Untermenschen and making the Untermenschen their underpopulated slave class that would feed the growing Aryan Ubermenschen, the above humans. This is all proto-transhuman crap. All of these ideas are there in transhumanism.
Yep.
And they Hitler spoke with Leo Amory and Philip Kerr, Lord Lothian, the guy who became the British Roundtable leader and ambassador to America. He was speaking with Hitler, and Hitler talked, it's transcribed. You could read the books where these transcriptions exist. In 1937, when Hitler is describing to Lothian how the British, the Scandinavians, here he's talking about the pro-Nazi Finnish and Swedish, who were both working with the Nazis, fighting Russia during World War II, which is, again, a big unresolved thing that hasn't been dealt with, which should also trouble people when Finland and Sweden are both
about becoming members of NATO. Little thing like that.
Yeah. So, and he's talking about how the Americans, the British, the Scandinavians, the French, and the Germans should together work to ensure that none of the dark-skinned or Asiatic races ever get access to industrial production and remain only agrarian. And he basically outlines what became the governing ethos after World War II of the World Bank, the IMF, and the entire growth of the neo-eugenics conservationist movements that were set up under Prince Philip himself, a guy who was trained in a Nazi-run pro-eugenics schooling system in Germany with his 4 sisters who marry leading Nazi officers. And this guy is trained and goes on to work with Prince Bernhard, a former Nazi high-level officer, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Together, they co-found the World Wildlife Fund and set up the They set up the World Wildlife Fund for nature, along with Julian Huxley, Sir Julian Huxley, the president of the British Eugenics Society in 1961, as a way to
sets up UNESCO, right?
He had set up UNESCO, calling for world government and making eugenics become palatable again for the population. In 1946, Julian Huxley sets up, right after he does UNESCO, he sets up the International Union for the Conservation of Nature in 1947, becoming the world's godfather of the modern conservationist movement. While he's still a lifelong member, this is before he becomes president of the Eugenics Society of Britain. He's openly living his life, not just saying nice, these fucked up words, but doing it. He's doing it as well as saying it. So that's something people, because a lot of people, they tell me, oh, but he's just saying words. And it's like, He's doing the things he's saying.
It's yeah, they do say a lot of words, and they do a lot of things. Last I checked, like we're watching these things happen. There's a tremendous amount of cope when it comes to all of this stuff, Matt, as you well know, because when you really think about the magnitude of even half of what you just threw out there. Right. And you don't have to believe. I mean, even if you're just listening to this and you're like, all right, whatever, Matt's the word salad, words, names, dates, all this stuff. Fine. Even if you only believe half of it, even if you only believe a quarter of it, it's still horrific. It's still insane. Right. And they still do the things that they say they're going to do. And because it's staring you right in the face when you look at the aftermath, look at how they argued through COVID, look at how the aftermath thereof and everything with the vaccines and now the doublespeak and the oh no, I never ever said we should vaccinate everybody or lock down everybody. Fauci is literally out there like growing his nose like Pinocchio, for Christ's sake. And it's like, nothing changes with these people. They're caught in a lie and then they redefine the lie. This is what they do and they've always done, and they're going to deal with it. So one of the things I wanted to get into, which was really interesting in the article that I read the other day, was that why is the crown, not just that the crown has got its fingers in all of these pieces and pies and everything else, because the last 6 months or so was let's start with the why is Charles king? Well, because Elizabeth died, but the circumstances around Elizabeth's death. I'm not gonna get all conspiratorial here or anything. Before I'll turn the mic back over in just a second, but Liz was 96 or whatever she was. She was at the end of her lifespan. So, but at the same time, like all of the things that happened around her death within that 2 or 3 week period certainly feel like a coup to me, because not only did we get the new king, but we got a quick changeover of prime minister and BlackRock shaking down the Bank of England over pension fund arrears and a whole lot of other things, which I mentioned all of this in post after post. And to me, it just looked like the reversal of Brexit, as we went from Liz, who, for all of her faults, seemed to be on one side of the equation, and then Charles, who's always been aligned with what is now modernly known as, I call Davos, when we look at the World Economic Forum. So the question now is, the crown, as you will point out, isn't disinterested anachronism. It is absolutely an active agent. Otherwise, why is Charles doing what he's doing? And I want you to go through and just remind everybody what the crown actually owns. This is the thing that I knew this, but when I read it the other day, it just stopped me dead in my tracks. I'm like, dude, you've been following, you need to focus on this. I'm like, I literally got done with the article and said, okay, I need to have Matt on the show for this reason, because the breadth and scope of that which the crown actually controls in terms of actual property ownership. You think BlackRock owns the world? Fuck a whole lot of you. You ain't got nothing on the crown.
Yeah, I mean, no, yeah, we can start with that. Well, the crown, this might surprise people, is the world's largest landowner in the world by far.
By far,
there is approximately 6.6 billion acres under the possession of the crown internationally. And I mean, again, you got to keep in mind if you look at a map, and in the article I did this, I find it's very useful as an exercise. Look at a map of the British Empire in the 1920s at its height and compare it to the map of today's British Commonwealth. It's almost identical.
Yes.
It's like 22% of the world land surface area still covered, just like it was in the British Empire. They just gave themselves a little bit of a rebranding. Everything that is known as a crown land, something like 88% of Canada's surface area is crown land. Okay, that's a big deal. That is technically in legal terms under the ownership or possession of the crown. Crown corporations like the Bank of Canada. We're told, oh yeah, it's a crown corporation, so thus it's national and the people own it. It's like, no, the name itself it says it right there. It's a crown corporation. It's owned by the crown. There's something called the Crown Estate, which is one of the biggest estate companies or real estate companies in the world. which is an emanation of the crown. 25% of its revenue each year goes to whatever sitting monarch is sitting there. It owns half of the seabed around the British Isles. It owns more castles, farm area in Britain than any other company. It's massive. But you have all of these physical assets, and I think even more than that, you have looking at the Commonwealth in terms of strategic controls over nodes, trade nodes, drug money laundering. So the Cayman Islands, the British Cayman Islands, the offshore money laundering centers are zones which process the vast majority of illicit drug money and other things that are laundered, and maintain an international organized crime syndicate stretching all the way across Africa, Asia, Ibero-America, USA, Britain, everywhere. This is what has provided black budget operations for the carrying out of all sorts of terrorist activities as well. HSBC, the London, people think, oh, but China is controlling a lot of this. Look at Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank of Commerce. It's like, it's a name. It's a London-based organization, which, yeah, it does still control the money printing of Hong Kong money. That's bizarre. Even though Hong Kong was nominally given back to China back in 1997, why didn't this London-based imperial organization that was set up in 1865 in order to better process drug profits after in the wake of the Opium Wars designed to destroy China in the Century of Humiliation? Why are they still allowed to run roughshod there? Why is Hong Kong known as the CIA of the Pacific? Why were there British flags, and National Endowment for Democracy funded operations in Hong Kong, which were calling for a separation from China? Is it really a freedom movement the way a lot of conservatives who are anti-Great Reset and also anti-China? Is that true, or are we being lied to? We're being lied to. HSBC was caught under the Senator Carl Levin hearings in 2012 for having laundered, and they were found guilty, laundering hundreds of billions of dollars of drug money for decades, and they paid something like $150 billion, and had an auditor sitting in their offices doing nothing for 5 years until 2017 when there's no more auditor. Bank Putz, the Queen's personal bank, was also caught and found guilty the same year, 2012, for laundering massive amounts of drug profits over the course of decades. And in response, the Bank Putz, which manages the monarch's personal assets, had all of their Caribbean holdings sold off to the Royal Bank of Canada, which took on the task of doing the same thing. They didn't stop, just like HSBC didn't stop. So again, that's British Commonwealth territory, which sort of moves pieces around when certain illicit activities go public. It's sort of put under a new shell company, repackaged, just people can watch the spider's web.
Right. So in fact, it's like listening to you talk about it. I never really thought of HSBC this way. I probably should have. I don't know why I didn't. Like listening to you talk about it is actually kind of embarrassing. I'm like, oh Christ, I never even thought about that. That really HSBC being the primary transmissionary agent of the Hong Kong Monetary Authority is no different in effect than the City of London having control over U.S. interest rates. Like these people give up control, quote unquote, but they don't actually give up control. Right. So the United States is independent, but we haven't had an independent monetary policy because City of London controls our debt servicing rates and our debt indexing rates. Whereas, and same thing in Hong Kong, nominally it was given back to China. But if the Hong Kong Monetary Authority's got the Hong Kong dollar pegged to the US dollar, which is also under control of the City of London, and HSBC is the primary conduit in which the Hong Kong Monetary Authority transmit monetary policy, then who actually controls Hong Kong monetary? Who actually controls the value of the offshore yuan and the Hong Kong dollar, which is the primary mechanism by which China interfaces with the rest of the world? And when you listen to all of that, folks, then you should stop listening to Mitt Romney when he calls the Chinese a currency manipulator, because there's no absolutely there under no circumstances, if I were the Chinese communists, not nominally, I'm using air quotes, this is an audio podcast, communist or otherwise, why I would open up my fucking capital account to these goddamn people.
Yeah, no,
stop it. Like,
yeah, I know. When you're looking at LIBOR and everything, no, I mean, I think you're absolutely right.
This is when you're talking about HSBC, this is exactly where my brain went. So
no, dude, no, that's you're you're looking at things in a really useful way. That's exactly it. And I mean, China, the difference here is that China is actually trying to fight back again. Like they put HSBC, Standard and Poor's, on their foreign alien enemies list.
Yeah, Standard and Poor's or Standard Charter? Standard Charter.
Sorry, Standard.
Yeah, because those are the two big British banks that operate in Hong Kong. Just
brain.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, but
easy to get it wrong.
And Standard and Charter were both put on the foreign enemies list, even though they still have something protecting them and giving them control of at least 1/3 of the printing of Hong Kong money. But despite that, they're put on the foreign enemies list, showcasing a serious pushback and fight. Whereas no such similar fight do I see on that magnitude here, putting the LIBOR operators on foreign enemies list. Because I mean,
no, but we didn't do that. We went around that by just like getting rid of LIBOR. Like, so in 7 weeks, the LIBOR will be over, and for the first time in literally our history, we'll have our own.
Thank God.
We'll be able to prosecute our own monetary policy. This is This is a very big thing. Remember.
Yeah. That's a good point.
SOFR will replace LIBOR.
Nice. That adds a lot of strength to your core thesis that you've been maintaining for the past several months, or even or couple of years, even, I think.
Yeah, it's a couple of years now. I started this in June of 2021 when I went. I think Powell's trying to piss everybody off, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what's happening. And then I just kind of went through it, and this has been going on for now almost 2 years, and I think it's very clear what's happening. And the death. I don't want to go deep into domestic policy at this point because I want to stay on the Crown for a little bit longer. Then we can go off in the La La Land or wherever we're going to go from there, because there's still other things to be dealt with here, which is that the British Crown is, because it's that powerful. And when you really stop to think about what these Davos fuckers want, they can't get it done without the British Crown. They can't get it done if they don't control the British Crown. And when you go back to think about the Trump administration, all right, this is the big deal. Do you remember the hue and cry from all the usual suspects about Trump visiting with the Queen? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. From my perspective, the goal here was always to, like, Britain with Brexit has always been the fulcrum on which faction was going to have control over the direction of the future of the West. Is it going to be European centric via the World Economic Forum, or is it going to be American Anglo-centric with the Crown, or which way is the Crown going to be pulled? And I think it was very clear that powers within the United States were actually pulling, again, with the shift from LIBOR to SOFR with Powell. I think Wall Street has gone off the reservation, and that the Crown was given a choice, in effect. Which way are you going to go? And I think Liz was happy to go with her American partners and tell the Germans no. And this is the way I've been reading it. And then why that had to be executed, why Brexit had to be reversed. Now, that may be a naive look at it, but that's the way I've mapped it. Now, if you've got a different theory, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I there's similarities, but it's a little. I'm looking at it a little bit differently.
Sure.
And here's the way I'm looking at it. I think a book could be written kind of like what I've tried to do for the Clash of the Two Americas, which actually showcases, like I alluded to.
Right.
When people think of America, they think of one thing, and they don't think of like something with internal fights going on within.
Right.
And outside of, like in Canada, right, coming down,
right,
directed by foreign agencies representing old hereditary customs and very feudal social orders that are trying to restore some fictitious pre-American Revolution, pre-Renaissance view of organizing society around human talking cows under a master class of inbred super
neo-feudalism.
Neo-feudalism with a technocratic, with a little bit more Philip K. Dick on the top, like just to make it all work, right? Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
So something similar could be written for Britain, called like the Clash of the Two Britons or something. C.S. Lewis actually alluded to this as well in some of his writings. How and he was very sensitive to the in his science trilogy. C.S. Lewis did a really great job exposing this Tavistockian operation that was working to create a new type of technological human created in laboratories by a master class of inbred elites. He actually talked about this and exposed this in a beautiful series of books and lectures. But he also talked about the good Britain, like that there's this authentic, freedom-loving British tradition, which I think, you know, we've seen emerge from time to time throughout history that has really pushed to use the law in a way that would benefit the people and liberate the people from the control of the more regressive feudalists.
Right.
So, and I mean, in more recent years, I think Jeremy Corbyn represented an example of that in a living way, even though he was ousted from the Labour Party. But he I mean, I've never seen somebody like that come to power in Canada. Canada is a much more controlled environment, whereas in Britain, much closer to the center of evil, you actually have the emergence of fighters who are anti-imperial, pro-Russian, pro-development.
It's because the British quote unquote election system is very weird. Like you can start a party and run for office in like 3 weeks, whereas here in the United States, like the barrier to entry to getting on the ballot is insane. It's off the charts how hard it is. So there's actually this weird thing where you can just like, you know, do a grassroots thing, get people pissed off, and they can show up at the ballot box and start electing people.
Yeah.
So
I agreed. But so, you know, you have the a Republican like Jeremy Corbyn, who's a devout, open Republican, become a near prime minister. He almost, which implies that there's more than simply him, which beats to that strategic way of thinking, which has influence, even though again he was ousted in 2018. Currently, I don't see anybody of that moral caliber in a position of political influence in Britain. But what I do tend to look at when I look at Britain and the internal faction fights between whether or not Britain becomes a branch of Davos or whether Britain becomes more of an independent agency. And I'm pro-Brexit, don't get me wrong. Something more similar to what was seen with Leo Amory of the Round Table movement. So Leo Amory was one of the members of Milner's Kindergarten, as was Philip Kerr, as was Lionel Curtis. Lionel Curtis is one of the Round Table members who worked with Milner to create the Chatham House, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, and he also oversaw the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations in 1919 in Paris, which was set up in America in 1921 as sort of the mothership, as Hillary Clinton called it, you know, that oversaw the organization of the different Rhodes Scholars and Fabians who were infiltrating different branches of the U.S. establishment to take over, which finally was, I think, fully culminated with Bill Clinton in a big way, who just saw a mass infusion of Rhodes Scholars who are still today controlling the Biden administration, Susan Rice and Jake Sullivan and oh my God, it's a big list of Rhodes Scholars. Bruce Reed, all that to say. So, okay, what was Leo Amory? Why am I bringing up Leo Amory? Leo Amory was the leading member of the British aristocracy who led in the ouster of the Nazi King Edward VIII, the guy who taught young Elizabeth the Nazi salute there, the Sieg Heil. And he led in changing British foreign policy from its previous pro-Nazi orientation, which the full establishment was pro-Nazi, up until a certain point when it became clear that Hitler was increasingly acting a little bit too renegade. He was a little bit too inclined to go with his generals and not with what Hjalmarschaft was telling him to do. And you know, Neville Chamberlain and what's his name, Lloyd George, who almost became prime minister again, was devoutly pro-Nazi. He would have been like the Nazi prime minister. Edward VIII was calling, even after he was expelled through the scandal with Simpson, what's her name, something Simpson. He was expelled with a scandal to get rid of him, but he was still writing letters openly to the Nazi high command from Portugal and then later on from South America, saying like, just keep bombing the British. They will bend. They will return back to their former agreement, and I will be your Nazi king once more. I promise you. Just keep on bombing. And a lot of this stuff was declassified more recently that this is all happening. So, but Leo Amory, a devout globalist, one world government fanatic, had a certain view, which was the Rhodes Scholar view of a recaptured America that would then be brought back under the British Global Commonwealth, that would be part of a hierarchical organization of economic power blocks that would manage a hierarchy of lower caste blocks, of which Europe would be a lower caste under a pan-Europa. This is what what's the name? Richard Coudenhove Kalergi, the founder of Pan-Europa, who worked very closely with a lot of these fascists. He was when he went to America in the 20s and then again in the 40s. He was working very closely with John Foster Dulles, with Walter Lippmann, with the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations actually gave him full platforms when he came here to organize the Pan-Europa. And he's the one who played the key role organizing Article 52 at the United Nations Charter at San Francisco at the UN Convention that brought in the mandate to create regional blocks, which was not formally part of the agreement for the UN. The UN was supposed to be no regional blocks like NATO, no regional blocks like the EU were ever supposed to exist. It was, and you can see that in the early articles like Article 2 and Article 1, which enshrine the sovereignty of the sovereign nation state and the illegality of any foreign war or of any wars of aggression. Those are enshrined in that code. So that unfortunately Roosevelt dies under very mysterious circumstances on April 12th. No autopsy, and Count Kalergi all of a sudden, who was complaining, and he's writing letters of complaint that are published, saying he can't even get any cooperation with Roosevelt and this crowd that won't allow him into the White House. All of a sudden, when Roosevelt dies, he's celebrating, saying he has full access to Truman. Truman's doing everything he wants him to do. He's assigned to set up and manage Count Coudenhove Kalergi, this guy who was from this ancient Venetian family going back to the First Crusades on both sides of the Kalergi and Coudenhove family. Very high-level Freemasonic, nasty creature.
Right.
He is now being set up to manage a big chunk of the Marshall Plan. He's working to create and shape the discussion at the San Francisco UN Convention that brings in Article 52 and 56 that creates regional blocks. Later on, that's the basis of the legal argumentation for the creation of NATO. NATO has been set up to get around the UN Security Council, which gave way too much authority to China, Russian countries who are not playing ball to veto things that they don't like. This is what creates the European Union flag was drafted along with the anthem, a terrible perverse use of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony by Count Coudenhove Kalergi, the same European Union flag with the European Federation. The Lisbon Treaty was Count Coudenhove Kalergi, run by his Pan-Europa, that Wehrmacht, leading Nazis were all supporting of this for a long time.
Right.
What's his name? Oswald Mosley of the British Union of Fascists was a confidant of Pan-Europa and Coudenhove Kalergi. They create the European Union with this argument too. NATO itself was, the whole architecture was created by Escott Reed, a Canadian Rhodes Scholar from Oxford, brainwashed in Oxford, deployed back. Escott Reed, he sets up in 1931, the Fabian Society of Canada with 5 other Rhodes Scholars, one of whom, F.R. Scott, goes on to become the manager, the handler of a Fabian who's brainwashed by Harold Lasky, named Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who deployed back after a 500-day tour of the Empire in 1949. He's deployed back and he's set up in the Canadian Privy Council, which, by the way, is the controlling nerve center of the government, the real shadow government of Canada's deep state is the Privy Council. That manages everything, the military, the civil service, you name it, it's the Privy Council, the Treasury. So Pierre Elliott Trudeau, his handler is F.R. Scott, one of the 5 other Rhodes Scholars, along with Escott Reed, who sets up the Fabian Society of Canada, which is called the League of Social Reconstruction, with the mandate in 1931 of resolving the Great Depression by bringing in a scientifically managed post-capitalist order.
Right.
And the fact that a lot of these creatures are all devout eugenicists is not a coincidence. Escott Reed is that guy who becomes the first secretary of the Canadian Roundtable, which is sort of the Canadian branch of the Council on Foreign Relations, called the Canadian Institute for International Affairs, which has as its president Robert Borden, the former Prime Minister of Canada, who's the guy who pulled Canada into World War I. This Prime Minister is a Masonic Orangeman working with the Milner Roundtable Group in ousting a pro-Lincoln prime minister in 1911. Wilfrid Laurier, Prime Minister of Canada, ousted in a roundtable coup. And Wilfrid Laurier writes letters to his assistant saying that Canada is now run by an organization in London called the Roundtable, with its controllers in the Grits and in the Tory parties, that is, aka the Liberals and the Conservatives,
Right.
who now are pulling us into enmeshment into these foreign wars.
Right.
And so this is on record. This is a coup d'etat run inside of Canada at the same time as the Roundtable had also done a soft coup in Britain, ousting Herbert Asquith in 1916 under Lord Milner's direction, installing this pro-Nazi, pro-fascist operative named Lloyd George as prime minister, who gets Britain into the, well, basically positions Britain into a place where they could create the League of Nations as the first attempt at a one world post-nation state government run by a eugenics masterclass,
Right.
which failed because you had nationalists in America like Warren Harding, who came to power as the Lincoln Republican, the last one to rise as a Republican in the 20th century, and who fought against this whole globalist clique and ensured that America would not give up its sovereignty, and worked with leading patriotic Democrats as well as Republicans together in opposition to the CFR, deep state, which killed him when,
I was going to say, I was just about to say, and for his troubles, Do Nothing Harding was killed for it.
He was, yeah. I mean, and they say, "Oh, natural death." Yet no autopsy. So
the same thing with Scalia, right? Like,
all of these
Supreme, the most consequential Supreme Court justice, and died in his sleep. It's like, okay. No
conspiracy minded person, as we are.
I prefer him, Reynolds heavy duty for my tinfoil hat, but everybody should salt the taste. Except no substitute. But I mean, no, seriously, when you look at all this, it's very clear that there's a strong through line. This is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on today. It was just to even just impress upon people just how deep the rabbit hole goes and how close these relationships are, and how well and truly this has been a multi-generational foundational building block, all centered around and emanating from the last empire. They're quote unquote the remnants of the last empire, which is the British Empire. Now, the big question here today, as we sit here after we're just under an hour into this, and this is where I'm focused at all times, which is, okay, what's next? Because the system that they've set up, Matt, is fundamentally unsustainable. In no way is it sustainable. Without, they think that they're going to, move us to a monetary system unmoored from opportunity cost, and they will just be able to whip us and say, nope, you aren't a good enough person. You said something double plus ungood on Twitter. You don't get a car loan. You don't get to order a pizza. You don't get to go to work. Yada yada yada. That's where that's where they clearly want us to go. And now the fun part is, can they pull it off? Now, this is when you look at a system that they've built that's this unwieldy, and you go, okay, everybody has to be in it, and everybody has to be in the prisoner's dilemma, or it all fails.
Yeah. Because
if one reasonably powerful faction just drags their feet and goes, you know what? No, the whole thing just collapses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so exactly. This is the question I have for you because you're the closest thing I know to an expert on the British Crown. I could probably get Alex Crane on here. He'd do some other version of this, right? Because Alex is freaking lit, dude. I love that guy.
Yeah.
Is Charles was clearly groomed, and I use that word with all amount of double entendre, for the current job of transferring the power of the crown itself to the world, or however you want to look at it. The crown is going to take over the world, or whatever you can. It doesn't really matter. It winds up being both. It winds up being 6 and 1/2 dozen together. The question is, does the crown survive this? Because, as we've noted, it's not just that the democratic process got a low barrier to entry in Britain for a populist overthrow. That's irrelevant. You still have the House of Lords, you still have the civil service, you still have all of this stuff. The bigger question is, why? When are the people just going to, you know what? guillotines. Like, we did this once with Oliver Cromwell. We can do it again.
Well,
And
we
I've
did
been
this with Charles's namesake, Charles the First,
right.
who lost his head. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, Oliver Cromwell oversaw that. So the fact that Charles has that namesake, that heritage, doesn't bode well for him. I I don't know exactly what it's going to take the British people per se. There's definitely more radical anti-monarchist sentiment in Britain than there even is in Canada, in my assessment.
Right.
It's much more strongly felt. Like I said, they had a Republican anti-monarchist as nearly who almost became prime minister, Jeremy Corbyn, not that long ago. That implies a massive amount of support. And just like Trump, Corbyn had much more support than we've been led to believe. It's just that there was a lot of effort from the deep state within Britain to keep him out, and to give off the idea that he was this fringe thing. But I mean, the guy's the head of the Labour Party, right? He's a devout enemy of Blair.
Right.
So I don't have a direct answer, but I could say, in my view, that the ideology of this feudal masterclass wannabe gods of Olympus inbred system has so many built-in self-contradictions, and relies. Here's the thing about the oligarchy: they're quite sophisticated at planning ivory tower style, and the arts of conspiracy, corruption, and getting as many degrees of separation between thought and physical material action as possible. So the oligarchy has been cultivating this power of using deceit, getting useful idiots to make useful idiots idiots with what the Venetians call the art of Tertius Gaudin. So the third that wins, right? So the two people who are fighting in direct combat will only on the surface appear to be actually the ones causing the combat on stage, but in reality, you might miss that there's a third party manipulating both sides, and that third party is the winner.
Right.
But to make that game work, it requires that everybody remain ideologically on the same game theory page, as you alluded to just now. Right. Everyone has to believe in zero sum. It's me first against the weak. If everybody gets into that mindset, heart and mind, yeah, the game kind of works that way. But as soon as people start becoming human, that means creative beyond the machine-like game zero-sum game theory stage, and actually creative human beings who think about the future, the deep past, and introducing variables that no machine could do, no AI could do what the human mind can do when it's in its healthy state. All of a sudden, the game breaks down. And so what I'm noticing is that throughout history, the oligarchy, when they come down to action time, they create systems that tend to blow up in their face. When it comes down to, like, now getting out of the theory and into the action. We saw it in World War II, where their Nazi Frankenstein monster ended up kind of turning on the handlers of the Nazi machine, whereby, as I alluded to, even within the British High Command, there was this bit of an abortion of a plan that was decades and decades were poured into the cultivation of the Hitler machine and Nazism and fascism more generally as the enforcers of a new world order.
Right.
That had to be aborted because, I mean, Hitler at a certain point realized, well, shit, with what I have under my control right now, I don't have to be the junior partner. I could be the senior controller, and Britain could be my junior partner. And, we'll get along okay. But Britain, some oligarchs like King Edward VIII was happy to go along with that. Or Oswald Mosley was like, yeah, let's just do that. And other ones like Leo Amory were like, no, let's not do that. Let's get it. And Churchill as well. We're like, no, let's preserve the British Empire and live to fight another day. And maybe we'll think more long term about doing something multi-generational now, instead of trying to like do the Milner Rhodes quick satisfaction thing.
Right.
And so here we are now, many decades after the death of JFK, the cover-up of his brother's death, and Martin Luther King, and now we're in the culmination of a lot of planning. The stick that's been bending is now breaking, and I think the world is turning out to be not what the ivory tower theoreticians thought it was going to be. There's a lot more creativity on stage, a lot more variables that are not behaving the way the script was promising it was going to behave back in 1992.
Yep.
I think that they got a lot of they need. I think at the inner echelons of the oligarchy, I think they are vicious and intelligent in a certain way.
Yes.
But they require auxiliaries to carry out their will,
Of course.
to do things. And their auxiliaries, as you listen to Kamala Harris or Justin Trudeau, are the stupid friggin' mediocre.
Right. That's the thing. They now have, it's like anybody who's, I didn't grow up around money. Right. But I have friends in my life who have, and they always say the same thing to me. It's like, you can always tell the grandkids of money. Like they're the ones that are like destroying the wealth. Like the dad made it, the grandfather made it, the dad maintained it, and the kids squander it. And we have the same kind of thing with, Ursula von der Leyen, Charles. I look at the European Union and I'm like, really, I'm supposed to be scared of the edicts from Ursula von der Leyen, Charles Michel, Joseph Borrell, and Guy Verhofstadt. And I look at these people and I'm like, no. And I think a lot of people, I think that's the thing. And I've said for years, I just say, look, these people are very smart, but they're not very clever, right? They do the same thing over and over and over again because what worked before should work again because that's the only heuristic they have. And then when it doesn't work, they are left wanting. And then, moreover, as you build up these systems, and I think your point about Hitler was correct, or it's interesting. I don't know if it's correct or not, but I think it's an interesting one, which is that, Hitler said, I could just take this whole thing over for myself. Well, that's where China is today, and that's where the United States is today. I think there are forces within the United States who are very clearly going, why should we give this power back? Why? We own King Dollar. You're the anachronism. You're Europe. You haven't created anything interesting other than warfare in 300 years.
Yeah.
We left Europe to get away from you fucking people. That's why we're Americans. We don't have the same values you do. I make this point all the time. I'm like, we're the sons and daughters of grandkids or great grandkids of Europeans who said, you know what? Fuck Europe. And everywhere you look, everybody's telling us that we all have shared values.
Yeah.
They create out of whole cloth the Judeo-Christian tradition. Like, excuse me? That was created out of whole cloth by communists in the 1950s or whatever. They're all commies to me. Like, it doesn't matter whether they're fascists or neocons or they're all just commies because that's what they are, because they redefine terms in order to suit their bad arguments when they lose. Like, this is where we are. And this is what we can see. They thought they were going to give us the internet and then use it to enslave us. And sorry, we know how to talk to each other like human beings. Some of us are still awake. Some of us know how to use our brains for something other than a hat rack. Like, it's like, this is, Matt, I watch this stuff in shock and awe at how clever they think they are. And I'm like, you still have to pay everyone,
Yeah,
the checks still have to not bounce. Like,
well, that's the thing, right? Like, and you just sort of
think about it.
The level of self-contradiction, it's so blatant. And I mean, the fact that they've put themselves in a position where they feel like they need to prepare to go to war economically, militarily, even with Russia, with China. They still want to bring back, what Wesley Clark was warning about back in 2007 regarding the bombing of Iran, that they still want to do. They haven't let go of any of those strategies that they put forth in the 90s with the end of history. But despite the fact that they want to go to war with countries that are in Eurasia, especially China and especially Russia, but especially China, because China actually has a capacity to economically, do things that we used to do a long time ago, like build massive infrastructure really effectively. China could build, they've got like 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail that they've built up in only, not even 20 years. They're building up, like, half of the nuclear power in the world is being built by China and India, which involves third, fourth generation nuclear reactors, fast breeder reactors, thorium, molten salt reactors, fusion in every single field of fusion that you can look at. They're doing it all. And they're doing it in such a way that they're going towards South Asia and organizing peace deals between Saudi Arabia and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Syria and Turkey and Syria and the whole, like, I mean, my God, and Africa.
All of this stuff that was all of this area of the world that the Brits have used soft power.
Yeah. And we
for years and set up, and set up something and anti-something. So India and anti-India, Pakistan or whatever. The British always do this.
Northern Sudan.
Right. Exactly. Same thing.
Back in the 50s, actually. And then Susan Rice, Rhodes Scholar, goes and consolidates that in 2009.
Right.
Better do what exactly is in danger of blowing up again today, which it's just these powder kegs, like you said. That's what they do.
Right.
So
and they leave them as tripwires in order to blow them up when it's convenient and when the timing is convenient. So whenever India and Pakistan look like they're actually gonna start getting along, a bomb goes off and kills a bunch of Indians in Punjab. The same thing with India and China. The border dispute is all an MI6 CIA operation for fuck's sake, folks. It's not that difficult.
Formulaic. It's so formulaic.
It is.
By the way, for those who are like, oh, but it's the Jews. It's the Jew. No, I mean, I'm sorry. Israel, political Zionism was created by Lord Palmerston, right? And Lord Shaftesbury, who were the first political Zionists that created the Palestinian Expedition Fund in the 1860s in order to create the foundations upon which a later state, a Jewish ethnic state, could be created that was consolidated or shaped by people like Lord Balfour, Lloyd George, the rabid anti-Semitic fascist pro-Nazi, was one of the co-architects of the Balfour Accords that set up out of British Mandate Palestine a very particular useful geographical zone that would be the intersection of Africa and Asia and Russia and Europe into a hotbed that if anyone could destabilize that region, they could ensure that no possible danger of collaboration amongst civilizational states.
Yes. And because because the Turkic nations, the European nations, the Arabs, everybody coalesces around that area, and it's and then you leave, and then Sykes-Picot leaves Syria, Iraq, and Iraq a complete mess, right?
Yeah.
Ethnically, geographically, makes no sense. Why do the Kurds not have their own place? They spread the Kurds over 4 different countries. They do it on purpose.
And here's the thing: look at the Turks, right? Young Turks. So Lord Palmerston with Mazzini were working at creating these different anarchist, ethno-nationalist groups in the 1840s, 50s called the Young Europe movement. In America, Albert Pike was a leader of this Mazzini network called the Young America movement of the South, the Southern branch. That's what the Confederacy was. It was a Young America branch of a Palmerston London operation of and they had young Finland, young Albania, young Turkey was run by a Trotsky collaborator named Alexander Helfand, and the grandson of Mazzini out of a Freemasonic operation in Greece that ran this thing in Turkey and created the Young Turks that then created the base of the entire Balkan wars that started enmeshing a weakened Russia into what became later on a war of just total annihilation of Russia and the Bolsheviks, which were again organized by Wall Street, by City of London.
Yes.
Lord Milner was a key financier of a big chunk of the Bolsheviks. Trotsky was in Wall Street, getting checks from Jacob Schiff, who was also in the midst of building up this complex, getting rewarded by the Japanese emperor. One of the highest foreign words you could give to a foreigner in Japan was given to Jacob Schiff for having given $20 million to the Japanese war machine for carrying out a war with Russia in 1904. Jacob Schiff, the guy who's overseeing the creation of the Federal Reserve, along with a bunch of other like CFR connected, effectively pro-Nazi groups that are trying to kill Roosevelt, that run a coup d'etat with Smedley Butler. They try to overthrow the government, install a Nazi or a fascist order in America, which Butler blows the whistle on. And they tried to use their anarchist Giuseppe Zangara in 32 to kill Roosevelt, February 33, which is avoided, but Mayor Cermak is killed. And this whole nest of British-directed fascists that are the deep state have been incubating in America, trying to do the same thing, setting up Israel, and radicalizing the like, because there's good Israelis too. There's a good and a bad Israel. Like,
of course, it's like there's none of these factions are monoliths.
No,
this is the hardest part for people to understand. So when I say, look, Wall Street's not a monolith, right?
Yeah.
There are there's Davos Wall Streeters and there's non-Davos Wall Streeters. There's those under the auspice of the New York Fed, and then there's Janet Yellen's crew destroying America at the San Francisco Fed. Like, I in last month's Gold Guts and Guns newsletter, I wrote, I think it was last month, it might have been the month before, I was writing about America and how and the theme was, we're being gaslit by morons.
Yes.
We are being gaslit by morons. And I said, look, I was laying the whole thing out. And I said, look, for people who don't want to understand that the neocons and Davos are not the same groups of people. One are British, American, Anglo thing, and the other one is a purely European colonialist. And I'm like, it's like Stalin versus Trotsky all over again. You got the Trotskyites in the United States and in Britain. You've got the Stalinists in Europe. It's nothing has changed. It's the same shit. It's just Stalin and Trotsky all over again.
Well, the way I see it is you got the industrial capitalists and you got the feudal capitalists. The feudal capitalists are just feudalists with capitalism.
Trotsky and Stalin. Neither of these people are freaking capitalists, Matt. Like, that's the problem.
Well, I got to say one thing. I have been looking into Stalin a little bit more by reading Grover Furr's books. You know Grover Furr?
No, I don't. But
he's an interesting guy. He's been going through declassified archival material.
Right.
I'm actually developing a respect for Stalin.
Okay,
and I think he was actually, but that's a whole other conversation and a can of worms.
Well, but again, it's like, and when you think about the way the state capitalism in China, I hate to put capitalism with anything other than anarcho-capitalism, but just for terminology, for shorthand, the state capitalism model that you're seeing in China today, and to a lesser extent in Russia, is a defense mechanism at best against the aggressive, hyper-financialized capital, quote, turbo capital, whatever you want to call it, that we're practicing corporatism, or we're practicing here in the West. They have to do that. This is not something, but this is a system, not a society. There's a difference. And we, unfortunately, in the West, and I've gone over this, I think you and I talked about this before, that there's a fundamental difference between the system that the people live under and the society and the conception ideologically of the society itself. China is China, Russia is Russia. You can install different systems at various times, but they're still Russians, they're still Chinese. The West's identity is very systematically tied to its culture. So our identity is very much tied to our system, and that's our fundamental problem. So that's why go ahead.
I see a system like I'm holding scissors here for those listening. I see a system like I would any tool, and it's like, I don't identify with being the scissor guy. I don't have to go around like poking people in the eye with my scissors. However, if I know how to use my tool, I might need to use a scissor and cut things. And so it's a very useful tool. So it's a system to make it. So
again, like in some ways I can see the argument why someone could look at how Stalin reacted to what was happening around him to have to go the way I'm not absolving Stalin. Like, I'm not doing any of that stuff. But in the same way, I'm not absolving Putin of his failures, or I'm absolving Xi of his failures. But I can understand why they have gone the route they have, because they've talked about it at length as to this is a defensive posture. And when I talk to people like Alistair Crook and Joaquin Flores and a few others who think in these civilizational terms, and I brought these ideas up, they're like, absolutely, this is the way they're thinking. These are temporary systems they put in place as kind of civilizational immune systems.
Yeah, exactly.
Immune system response,
like a combat sport in a sense, except it's multi-generational. I mean, we go back centuries, like you just said, it's civilizational, and if your opponent in the middle of a combat sport develops a new weapon, which you're not going to see in this stage, obviously in the arena, but when you're dealing with like these are fights that are going on for decades and centuries. If a new capability is introduced by your opponent, if you don't have some symmetrical response to generate some similar type of shield or something that can absorb or counteract that power, you're fucked. So the way
central banking is the key technology that the rest of the world has been fighting. It's just that simple.
It's a weapon.
It's a massive weapon. So and it can be used, and at the end of the life cycle of this technology, it can be used both ways. It can be used as the ultimate apotheosis of the particular weapon. Will it enshrine itself as the system of the world, or, to quote Neil Stephenson, or can it be used as a weapon to break it down?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way I'm looking. That's the way I'm watching the Federal Reserve and the American banking system at this point, because it's very clear to me that they have all the leverage because King Dollar is still too strong.
I see it in the same way, and for me, it's like if the West is going to be able to morally be fit to survive the oncoming storm that in many ways we allowed and we brought upon ourselves by our own neglect and choice of accepting stupid ideas that are in defiance of truth and natural law. If we have the moral fitness to survive, it will be because the true industrial capitalists, the people who actually love freedom and want to create something, like create capital. That's the whole point of capital, is the creation of capital, not to use the idea of the markets as an excuse to go and rape and pillage the weak. It's to create something and to create business and opportunity.
Yes,
that will be because they won. That because this grouping is able to organize themselves. As I think that there's evidence of this happening, and we saw this with Trump's 2016 victory. That couldn't have happened were it not for a big chunk of private interests who recognized that they were targeted for being decapitated under a Green New Deal, Great Reset, where everything that emits carbon is going to be illegal in this depopulated world order of a green, so-called green capitalist age, like what Prince Charles, the co-founder of the Great Reset, Prince Charles, of the Sustainability Development Initiative.
Exactly, going all the way back to the crown.
Prince Charles.
And I agree. And I think that when you look at we go back over the Trump administration, it's going to be if I'm correct, and I'm correct on how I've read the Fed, and you're correct about the flow of history. We're going to be looking back on it going, most consequential action of Trump's presidency was the nomination of Jerome Powell as Fed chair. Because how does that happen if the commies are in charge?
We might have, the Patriots might have more power than we
I'm still trying to figure that one out, dude.
There's too many black-pilled people out there. And, look, Jerome Powell, he was part of the church committee hearings, right? Like, he was the assistant for, what's his name? The guy who ran the Bureau of the investigation of assassinations into JFK and Martin Luther King, which was a branch of the church committee. He was the assistant for the head congressman.
And he was part of all that. He was part of sweeping Solomon Brothers under the rug. I mean, Powell's been around a long time.
I think that anybody who's too black-pilled and just tries to piece everything into it's all controlled, there is no fight box, they will not be able to account for a lot of anomalies.
Yes.
Of which this is just one of them. Trump's victory was an anomaly that can only be accounted for by how China was able to kick out George Soros in 1989, while Soros has been permitted to run roughshod in the West. That's an anomaly. How they were able to move their population from abject poverty as a third world country 55 years ago to becoming a country with, a life expectancy which is now on average longer than your average American life expectancy at 80 years of age in China, which is down to 76.9 years of age in America.
Yep.
Or has a middle income bracket which was 3% of the population of China in the year 2000, which is today 54%. You can't explain any of these anomalies if you just hold on to it's all one giant Great Reset death cult managing everything and everybody's controlled opposition.
Yep.
Why didn't they win yet? Why are we still alive? Why are we having this conversation?
Why do we even have channels? Why aren't we both in Guantanamo getting waterboarded?
Exactly.
Because we should have been by now. If they were all powerful. They're not. I mean, remember, I remind everybody, I've had the FBI to my house to tell me to stop writing for Strategic Culture Foundation. Okay? Once to inquire, and second to personally hand me the OPAC letter, and with a little bit of warning, they were very nice about it. But by the way, it happened. It's real. I've got it downstairs, and it's not a big deal, folks. I'll show it to you. If things were as bad as everybody thought it was, I do this and the problem here is going, okay, well, he was a bad guy 20 years ago, or he took government money 20 years ago. Elon Musk, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Well, he was a bad guy, and he might have looked in the mirror or saw them sipping adrenochrome one night when what? That's it. You guys are sick. I'm out. Shit happens to everybody. Like Jamie Dimon, he's a bad guy. He also has an aortic section in New York and nearly dies. And they're trying to take his bank away from him. And he's got jackals within JP Morgan trying to take him over. I don't buy it. Like all of a sudden, it's all Epstein, all Diamond, all day long, and everybody falls for it. Like, really, Lucy in the football, you haven't learned this one yet. Like, come on. Like, I can see this I can see this playing out. I'm not saying that Diamond's a good guy. What I can say is that Diamond doesn't want to wind up in the poorhouse, and he doesn't want to hand JP Morgan over to Klaus Schwab. That's what I can work with that. And we should all be willing to work with that, because we're all going to sit here and like go, yeah, I want to fight for freedom, but I want to get my hands dirty. Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah,
that's nice. So so the Libertarian Party is down there on the right, and they meet. They all four of them. They're over there. Splitters, the Life of Brian joke. And then we'll go from there. I'll get off my soapbox.
We're living through interesting times, man. We're living through interesting times.
I mean, seriously, like I say this all the time. I've been there's one group that I've been saving more savagery for than anything else. It's my people, like and with good reason. Like they're not getting it done.
No, I know. Well, look, I mean, the American people especially have we all do. I mean, I'm Canadian, right? But we still have a big responsibility to take responsibility for things that are in the greater good. If our grandparents didn't think this way, and if they weren't willing to risk their lives or more Hitler would have the Wall Street London funded fascist machine would have been victorious, and we would have had a one world government under a eugenics depopulated regime already for the past 80 years running the show. And the world would be very ugly and different and dystopic by now had that. So we were bought time, and it's not like the victory was totally won. Just like after the American Revolution. This is my soapbox time here. So after the American Revolution, my moral righteousness time. But it was a victory, but it wasn't a full victory. And the moral torch was passed down to the next generations, who had to keep the torch alive. Some generations did a poorer job than others. But now the torch is passed on to us to carry on the fight to finalize what the revolution of 1776 was originally brought online to do, which was liberate humanity, not just 13 colonies. It was called the Continental Congress for a reason. And they were working with patriots from Russia, from Tsarina Catherine the Great, who led the League of Armed Neutrality. They had Republicans in France, in Prussia, in Ireland. 20 Irish generals came down to fight with Washington, and then want to bring that fight back to liberate Ireland from the control of the British Empire and hereditary institutions more broadly. Poland, same thing. India, you had the Mysore Rebellion in southern India that was writing letters to the Continental Congress saying your fight is our fight against the British Empire. So it was a global movement to bring humanity, in my view, to an age of maturity where we could recognize that our true interest was in creativity, not simply consumption and fighting over diminishing returns of a Malthusian pie. That was aborted. We saw the destruction of the French Revolution that turned into a Jacobin bloodbath funded by British-run agents that basically turned the whole thing into a giant mess, creating a vacuum whereby a Rothschild stooge named Napoleon could be introduced as a proto-fascist with his own global imperial ambitions to revive a Roman Empire. Same thing what Hitler wanted to do was, he had his own godlike messianic complex to create an imperial world order. But it blew up in their face as well. So we have this history, and this is why I love the future more than the present. Like a lot of people say, oh, you're stressed out too much about the future and the past. Just live in the present. And it's like the present has no space for change, for creativity. The present is what it is.
Yes.
I love it. It's great, but the future is constantly being recreated by the choices that we're making or not making at every second, all of us at different amplitudes. The future is where it's at, and the future is being shit. The past, looked at properly, is not shit that happened. It's the effect of futures that did or didn't happen. All of the past is people who planned longer or shorter terms into the future and worked to make it happen, and it did or didn't to varying degrees. And so that's life. Life is, and we are going to be like, this is a more competent way of approaching what Kamala Harris was trying to say but failed because she's stupid, which is that the present is, in a sense, the past of the future. So the future historians will be looking at us now and judging what we did or didn't do in the present according to what was available to us. And if we all just sit back in our homes watching YouTube videos and complaining about how screwed up the world is and we don't do anything, we're going to get the type of world that we deserve.
Right. We're going to get there's a it's funny. It's like there rarely do you ever get truth out of a person in Hollywood. But there was a time a while ago, I can't remember, it was Harrison Ford was actually, I remember this distinctly. This is probably a good way of ending this, which is, he said, who's being asked about storytelling and all this stuff. I think it was on a press tour for one of his minor films. And he said, we get the stories we deserve. We don't get the stories we should want, or we should demand. We get the stories we deserve. And that's where we are. And he said it very derisively and very dismissively because, well, he's an old curmudgeon. But he wasn't wrong. We get exactly that which we ask for. And if we don't ask for anything or demand, if we don't demand anything better, then that's what we're going to get. If we're okay with not making a decision and not making, substantive choices about what we want to do. Okay. The choices are always in front of you. You have everyone comes with opportunity cost. Choose to, and those choices can be very small. I want to stress the point you just made. We make the future. We decide on what the course of the universe, or at least our version of what the universe looks like. It's our choice. And every choice that we make with our very limited time on this planet matters. So with that said, you want to live under the British crown? I don't know. I'm American. My people left. People didn't want to live under Mussolini either. So we came here.
Well said. Well said. Way to bring it back. That's a perfect way to wrap it up. I think that's great.
Thank you. So we'll talk again soon. Matt, thank you so much for today and what you do. And I'll
say one thing for those who want to dig in a little bit more into some of the more shocking, ridiculous claims that I've made in our conversation, and they want to verify my research. I've written 8 books, 4 of them on the untold history of Canada, and 4 of them called The Clash of the Two Americas, of which volume 4 just came out. My wife also wrote a book called The Empire in Which the Black Sun Never Set, on the roundtable origins of fascism going back to the 19th century, which is bloody interesting. And all of these things are available on my website, on CanadianPatriot.org. If people have, if people don't have the money to buy them, because I understand the economic system has kicked a lot of people's asses, send me an email to CanadianPatriot1776@tutanota.com, and I will send you a free PDF of whichever book you want to read. And then challenge me, find holes in my arguments, and send me an email and see what you think. And if it's solid, if you don't see any holes in my arguments and it resonates with you, think about what Tom just said just now and about your relationship to that process that's discoverable and something you can act upon in a way which is beneficial to your unborn children and grandchildren and
your current community,
great grandchildren, and your current community immediately around you. Yeah.
All right, guys. All right, Matt. Excellent. Thank you for everything, and we'll talk soon.
Yes.
Take care. Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 142 of the Gold Goats and Guns podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Matt today. Always fun to dig into some of the history that I don't know very well, and to get somebody else's perspective on what I think is the history of the world. So, as always, salt to taste. Take from this what you can, and we'll be back again soon. I think I'm going to record soon with Vince Lanci, who I had on the show at episode 135, and we're going to go over some of the other wrinkles and what we think is going on in the gold markets and how that relates to the situation with the debt ceiling and everything else. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then I'm going to try and get some of my other more regular guests back on the show. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Do the thing. Sign up over at Patreon/GoldGoatsAndGuns to support the work that myself and Dexter White do, as well as to follow the blog over TomLuongo.me and me on Twitter at TFL1728. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. And keep your stick on the ice.